Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to really dig into the Luntz Rethug Playbook.
Oh, yeah.
This document's really interesting, lays out how Republicans can use language to kind of connect with voters better and win elections. Basically like a guide to the art of political persuasion. What do you think?
Yeah, it really is. And it goes, I think, beyond just like choosing the right words. This playbook's all about really understanding the emotions, the things that drive people's political choices on like a gut level.
Right. Like they talk about framing. What does that even mean in this context? I mean,
Sure. So framing is basically presenting an issue in a way that really clicks with whoever you're talking to.
okay.
So like instead of saying estate tax, which is kind of boring, they say use death tax.
Ooh.
It hits harder, right? It makes people think about dying and losing their money.
Makes you feel it more than just think about it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So you get a gut reaction instead of people like sitting down and thinking it through logically. So it's more about like feelings and less about logic.
Totally. You hit them in the feels,
Hmm.
appeal to their fears, what they want, that kind of stuff.
Interesting. So then when you get to something really complicated like the economy,
Oh, for sure.
what kind of advice do they give?
Well, they get that people are always kind of nervous about jobs, money,
Hmm.
even if the economy's supposedly doing great.
Right.
So instead of just saying, hey, the economy's strong,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds pretty out of touch,
Yeah.
they say, focus on the future. Like lay out a plan for jobs, prosperity, that whole thing. You know, give people hope instead of statistics.
Yeah, people want to know their jobs are safe, families are taken care of, that kind of thing. It's not just about like some big idea of the economy.
Exactly. Exactly. And they hit on that personal impact thing a lot.
Yeah.
Like when they talk about job training programs,
Mm-hmm.
they say call them pathways to careers or the American dream, not just jobs.
It sounds fancier that way, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's like you're not just working, you're building a life.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea that working hard gets you ahead really clicks with a lot of voters.
For sure, for sure. But then what about something like outsourcing? That's always bad news for American workers. So how do you even spin that?
They're pretty blunt about it. Never defend outsourcing as a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just alienates workers who are already scared of losing their jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
So instead of blaming the companies moving jobs overseas, blame the government, right?
Oh, we see.
They say, talk about the root causes outsourcing.
Yeah.
Taxes too high, too many regulations, that kind of stuff.
So you shift the blame away from the companies.
Exactly. Then you can offer solutions, bring jobs back to America, make us more competitive globally. Sounds good, right?
Oh, clever, clever. All right, let's talk taxes. Always a hot button issue.
Oh, yeah.
What's the playbook say?
Simple. Hammer on how bad tax increases are. They say it'll kill economic growth, hurt businesses, all that.
It's like that classic argument, lower taxes, everyone gets richer.
Exactly. Plays on people's natural instinct to want to keep their own money.
Right, right. But they also say to push for tax simplification. Why is that?
Well, kind of broadens the appeal. It's not just for the rich guys anymore, right? It becomes about fairness for everyone. More people are on board.
And of course, they go after the IRS.
Oh, yeah, big time. Paint him as this big, bad, inefficient monster, unfairly targeting hardworking folks.
People already hate the IRS, so they just play that up.
Exactly. Fuels the whole distrust of government thing, makes people want tax reform even more.
It's all about that emotional connection.
Yeah.
And they really go hard on the whole death tax thing.
Oh, absolutely. They know how much that phrase gets under people's skin. It's like the ultimate unfairness, right?
Yeah.
You die, and the government takes your money.
Yeah, they use some pretty heavy language like taxing the American dream.
Oh, yeah. They want people to feel it, It's personal, emotional. Your family, your hard work, taken away by the government.
Powerful stuff. All right, let's move on to Social Security. Always a sensitive topic. How do they say to handle that one?
Well, they get that it's a touchy subject, especially for older folks who rely on those checks.
Yeah, you don't want to scare off all those voters.
Exactly. First rule, reassure folks that their benefits are safe.
Yeah.
But they also want to reform the system.
Right, right.
So instead of Social Security, they say use retirement security.
It's like the same thing but sounds different somehow.
Yeah. It kind of opens up the conversation, right?
Uh-huh.
Makes room for other ideas like personal retirement accounts, which they love.
But what about people who are worried about Wall Street? After all those scandals, people are scared to trust the market with their retirement.
They get that. They get that. They say you got to promote financial literacy, empower individuals to make smart choices. Basically, shift the responsibility.
From the government to the people themselves. Interesting.
Yeah, whether that actually works is another question. But it's all about the messaging.
It's about winning the argument, even if the reality is a bit messier.
Exactly. Now, another thing they love to play up is lawsuit abuse. Everybody's got a story about some crazy lawsuit, right?
Oh, yeah, those stories are everywhere. So how do they tap into that?
Well, they say don't overdo it, don't sound too alarmist. Instead, focus on health care.
Healthcare. What's that got to do with lawsuits?
They argue that all those lawsuits drive up healthcare costs, make it harder to get treatment, all that.
Oh, I see. It connects the issue to something everyone cares about.
Exactly. People are already worried about healthcare, so it makes the problem feel real urgent.
Right. And they say to bring in big names like the American Medical Association.
Oh yeah, got to have those endorsements. Makes it sound like a real problem, not just Republican whining.
Adds credibility.
Exactly. And then you tell stories, real people hurt by these lawsuits, small businesses, doctors, make it personal.
Make people feel it, right?
Exactly. And of course, you got to talk about fairness. The system's rigged, they say. Rewarding greedy lawyers, not the victims.
It's that classic little guy versus the system story.
Works every time. Especially when people are frustrated, feeling powerless.
Right, right. All right, last one for now. Energy. It's all about power, national security, all that.
Big time.
So how do they approach this?
They hit hard on reducing dependence on foreign oil.
Yeah.
Make it about national security, keeping America strong.
Powerful message.
Oh, yeah, especially now.
Yeah.
Everyone's worried about energy, who controls it, all that.
Yeah.
So they tap into that desire for America to be self-sufficient, in control.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, ANWR's got to come up. That's always a battle.
Oh, for sure. They know drilling in ANWR is unpopular, so they try to soften it.
How do they do that?
Well, they say to emphasize how small the drilling area is compared to the whole refuge.
Downplay the impact.
Exactly. And they talk about the jobs, the energy independence, classic pro-drilling stuff.
Makes sense. But what about nuclear? That one's got a lot baggage, right? After all those accidents?
They don't shy away from it at all. Actually, they address the safety concerns head on.
Really? You'd think they'd just avoid it.
They talk about the benefits, of course. Yeah. Clean energy, reliable, all American-made. But they know people are scared.
Right.
So they talk about the safety regulations, the security measures, trying to reassure people, move from fear to confidence.
Interesting strategy. Okay, so we've covered a lot here. What's the main takeaway from this playbook? What are they trying to do with all these talking points?
At the end of the day, it's about winning elections. They want to frame issues in a way that connects with voters, gets them on board emotionally.
So it's not about being right or wrong. It's about winning hearts and minds.
Exactly. And that's where all this stuff comes in. The stories, the emotional appeals, the framing, make people feel it, not just think it.
It's a fascinating look into how all this political persuasion works, but how much of it is, genuine and how much is just manipulation. It's kind of hard to tell.
That's the big question, isn't it? And we'll keep digging into that as we go further with this playbook. So besides just the words, they're really big on symbolism, tapping into those images that everyone knows.
Yeah, what kind of symbols are we talking about here?
The American flag, obviously, but they also talk a lot about the Statue of Liberty, especially for immigrants. That whole idea of freedom, opportunity.
Yeah, that image of coming to America for a better life. That's powerful stuff.
Exactly. They say Republicans should connect their message to these symbols, piggyback on those feelings people already have.
Clever. So it's not just about what you say, it's about what people already associate it with.
Exactly. And beyond just symbols, they talk about owning certain themes, like adding opportunity to the idea of ownership.
So instead of just saying property rights, which sounds kind of legal, you talk about owning a home, a business, part of the American dream.
That's it. It's way more aspirational, relatable, taps into what people want, that deep down American value.
Makes sense. So it's about connecting your policies to those big aspirations everyone shares.
Exactly. And they're big on this whole compassionate conservatism thing, too.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't that a George W. Bush thing?
It was. And the playbook says it still works, especially for voters who think conservatives are too harsh,
So it's soften the edges a bit, make it sound more caring.
Right. They say, talk about government helping people but not controlling their lives. It's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so besides all this big picture stuff, does the playbook give any practical advice, like how to actually campaign, govern, that sort of thing?
Oh, yeah, they get into that, too.
Yeah.
One big thing they say is focus on what you're gonna do, not what you've already done.
Makes sense. Voters care about the future, right? Not just your past wins.
Exactly. It's about solutions, vision, hope. inspiring people, showing them where you're going to take them.
Be forward-looking, action-oriented. Now, what about the whole role of government thing? That's always a big divide between Republicans and Democrats.
Totally. And they know it's a tough one. They say you got to acknowledge that government does have a role, especially after 9/11, keeping people safe.
Right, security is a big deal.
Huge. But then they're also all about smaller government. So how do you square that circle?
Yeah, that's tricky.
They say use the phrase limited but effective government.
Ah, so you're not against all government, just the bad parts.
Exactly. It's about reassuring voters. You're not some crazy anarchist, but you also hate waste and overreach.
It's about finding that sweet spot. Enough government to keep us safe, but not so much that it gets in the way.
That's the idea. And another big thing they stress is credibility. You can say all the right words, but people got to believe you actually mean it.
Right, it can't just sound like a bunch of empty promises.
Exactly. Voters can smell a phony a mile away. So the playbook says you got to show genuine conviction, connect with people on a personal level.
So it's got to be more than just words. It's got to be about who you are, what you stand for.
Exactly. Like they point to George W. Bush winning in 2004. They say it was about authenticity, even if people didn't agree with him on everything.
So you got to be relatable, trustworthy, and actually believe in what you're saying.
Yep, got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And they have a lot to say about campaigning, too. Well, they're big on getting out there, meeting people face to face, spending time in your district, going to events, really getting to know the voters.
That's old school politics, right? Shaking hands, kissing babies.
It still works. People want to see you, talk to you, know you're one of them, not just some guy on TV.
It shows you're invested in the community.
Exactly. And of course, they talk about firing up your base, get those core supporters excited to vote.
Got to get those votes locked in.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial. But then you also got to win over the moderates, the independents, those swing voters who decide elections.
How do you do that?
They say focus on those big universal issues. Economic growth, jobs, national security, things everyone cares about.
Oh,
and don't be too extreme.
Don't scare people off.
Exactly. Instead of saying no government, say a more effective government. Sounds more reasonable, right?
Yeah, it's about finding that common ground. And finally, they talk a lot about accountability. That's a big one. Voters want to know you're going to be responsible with their money, actually do what you say you're going to do.
Right. It's about building trust, showing people you're working for them. So even though this playbook's all about Republican strategies, there are some pretty universal lessons here.
Like what?
Well, it's a great example of how to use persuasion, no matter what you're trying to sell. Framing, storytelling, connecting with people emotionally, that's all crucial.
Yeah, it's about understanding how people think, how to get your message across effectively. And it applies to way more than just politics.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This stuff's useful for business, marketing, even just everyday life.
It's a reminder that words matter, right? They can shape how we see the world, how we feel, even what we do.
Absolutely. And it's not just the words themselves. It's how you use them, the context, the emotions you're trying to evoke.
This playbook really shows how powerful language can be, how it can be used to persuade, to manipulate even.
It's a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Be aware of this stuff. Don't just accept what you hear at face value.
Right.
Think critically.
Don't be a sheep.
Exactly. Okay, now they also have this whole section with specific language recommendations, like a cheat sheet for talking like a Republican.
Oh, that sounds juicy. What kind of stuff are they saying?
Well, some of it's pretty eye-opening. Like they say never use the term global economy.
Why not? Sounds kind of harmless to me.
They say it makes people think about jobs going overseas, the world spinning out of control. Not good vibes.
I guess not.
So instead, they say use free market economy.
Oh, yeah. That sounds way more American, right?
Right. Fits right in with their whole philosophy. Free markets, less government, all that.
Smart. What else do they say?
Well, they're not fans of the word outsourcing either. Too much of a reminder of those lost jobs.
Yeah, that's a sore spot for a lot of people.
So instead, they say talk about the root causes of outsourcing. Blame the government again. Taxes, regulations, that kind of stuff.
Shifting the blame, changing the narrative. They're good at that.
Oh, yeah, they're pros.
Yeah.
Another one is instead of drilling for oil, say exploring for energy.
Ah, yeah. Drilling sounds bad. Exploring sounds more adventurous, positive.
Exactly. They want to paint this picture of responsible development, not just greedy oil companies ravaging the environment.
Makes it more palatable, especially for folks worried about the planet.
Right. And instead of tort reform, which sounds like a law school lecture, they prefer lawsuit abuse reform.
Ooh, yeah, that hits harder. Greedy lawyers, frivolous lawsuits, everyone hates those.
Exactly. They know how to tap into those feelings. It's all about framing, using the right language to get the reaction you want.
It's a reminder that the words we use have power, right? They shape how we see the world, how we feel about things.
Big time. And it's not just the words themselves, it's how you use them, the whole package. This playbook's a masterclass in that. How to use language for persuasion, even manipulation sometimes.
It's kind of scary, but also fascinating. Like, we got to be more aware of this stuff, right? Not just swallow everything we hear.
Absolutely. Think critically, question everything. Don't let people play you with your words.
Words can be weapons, or tools, I guess. Depends who's using them.
That's a great point. And this whole document, it's like a treasure chest of insights into how language works in politics, how it shapes what people believe, what they vote for.
It's like a crash course in political rhetoric.
It really is. And even though it's about Republican strategies, I think anyone can learn from it. Anyone who wants to communicate better, be more persuasive.
So what's the big takeaway for our listeners? What do you want them to think about after this deep dive?
I think the main thing is be aware of the power of language, how it can shape your thoughts, your feelings, even your actions. This playbook's a great example of that, but it happens everywhere, not just in politics. So be a critical thinker, question what you hear, look beyond the surface.
Don't be a sucker.
Exactly. Demand honesty, demand transparency. Don't let people manipulate you with their fancy words. Okay, now for the final part of our deep dive, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. How does this playbook handle those really tough issues? Budget, healthcare, education, all that.
Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into this playbook. We've seen how they use language, emotions, all that to really frame these complex issues. And one that's always a big one is the budget, government spending.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
It's so easy to get lost in the weeds there, all those numbers and jargon.
Yeah, it's a real snooze fest sometimes.
But this playbook says, don't focus on the numbers, focus on the principles.
Right, like what are your values? What do you believe in? That's what guides your spending.
So you're not just throwing numbers around, you're telling a story about what you stand for.
Exactly. And they say, always start by explaining how you decide where the money goes. Like, here's our process. This is how we make these tough choices.
It's about transparency, showing voters you're not just spending their money willy-nilly.
Exactly. Got to build that trust. Show them you're responsible, thoughtful about it all.
And they have a specific phrase they like, cutting wasteful Washington spending.
Oh, yeah, that one's a winner.
It's way more powerful than just saying balance the budget. It taps into that anger people feel, like their money's being wasted.
Oh, for sure. Nobody likes the idea of their hard-earned cash going down the drain.
Exactly. And the playbook says, don't talk like some economist, talk like a real person.
Right. Use language everyone understands. Instead of GDP and deficits, talk about families, businesses, real people's lives.
Make it relatable. Show how the budget actually impacts people on the ground.
That's it. And they say, always talk about the future, not just the now.
So like how your budget's going to affect the next generation, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They want to be seen as the party that's looking ahead, thinking long-term, the responsible ones,
The adults in the room.
Exactly. The playbook also talks about redefining government. What do they even mean by that?
Yeah, what are they getting at there?
Well, they say, talk about creating a more effective government, one that focuses on goals and results instead of all the partisan bickering in politics.
So it's like, less talk, more action.
Exactly. Get rid of all the waste and bureaucracy, make it lean and mean, actually solve problems.
Kind of like a business, right? Efficient, results-oriented.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Change the image of government from this big, scary monster to something that actually works for people.
Yeah, flip the script on that whole big government thing.
Right.
Speaking of flipping the script, they have some pretty specific advice on how to go after the IRS.
Oh, yeah. They say hold public hearings, expose all the IRS abuses, get people riled up.
Didn't they already do that back in the 90s?
They did. And the playbook says it worked like a charm. Got people fired up, made them want tax reform.
But it's like, find those stories of everyday people getting screwed by the IRS. Use those to fuel the fire.
Exactly. Make it personal, relatable, and people will demand change.
Powerful stuff. And maybe the most in-your-face example of this whole emotional manipulation thing is their advice on lawsuit abuse.
Oh, yeah, this is where it gets real.
This is where they pull out all the stops, right?
They know stories are powerful. So they say, find real people who've been hurt by these lawsuits and tell their stories.
So like a small business owner who got sued into bankruptcy, or a doctor who had to quit because their insurance was too high.
Exactly. Make it real, make people feel it, put a face on the problem.
Connect with them emotionally.
That's it. And they also link it to healthcare, right? Say all these lawsuits drive up costs, make it harder to get treatment.
Oh, that's smart. Everyone's worried about healthcare, so it makes it hit home.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Raises the stakes, makes it feel urgent.
And they're not afraid to play the fear card, are they?
Not at all. Talk about premiums skyrocketing, doctors quitting, people not getting the care they need.
It's like scare people into action, make them desperate for change.
Yep, that's the playbook. And of course, you got to frame it as a matter of fairness, too. The system's rigged, they say. Rewarding the greedy lawyers, not the victims.
It's that classic us versus them thing again. The little guy against the big bad system.
Works every time. Especially when people are already feeling frustrated, looking for someone to blame.
Yeah, you give them a target for their anger, and they're on board.
That's politics. So as we wrap this up, this whole deep dive into the Rethug Playbook.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners? What do you want them to walk away with?
The big lesson here is words have power. They can shape how we see the world, how we feel, what we decide.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It can be. But knowledge is power too, right? Now you know the game. You can spot these tactics. Don't be fooled by them.
Don't let people play you.
Exactly. And demand better from your leaders, from the media, from everyone. Insist on honesty, transparency. Use language to bring people together, not tear them apart.
Yeah, use your words for good, not evil.
That's it. This deep dive, it's been a real eye-opener. We've seen how language works, how it can be used, for better or worse.
Yeah, it's been fascinating and kind of disturbing, too.
For sure. But hey, at least now we're all a little bit wiser, right?
Yeah, we are. And with that, we'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. In a world where everyone's trying to spin things their way, how do we make sure language is used to build bridges, not walls? To understand each other, not just shout each other down. That's something worth thinking about. Until next time, keep on digging.